Hello, good evening, welcome to VideoBrains. My name is Christos Reid, also known as Phil. I'm a marketing producer, indie games developer, and former games journalist. And that's why we have.
Hi, I'm Laura Dale. I'm at Laura K-Buzz on Twitter. I run a website called indiehaven.com. I freelance for various places, and I sometimes make games as well. So, hooray!
Hello, I'm Philippa Warr. I'm a freelance journalist and written for various places, Wired, BBC, Rock Paper Shotgun, PC Gamer, those kinds of things. It's fine, makes a living.
Hello, that's so strange. I'm Emily Gera. I am the UK news reporter for Polygon.com. I don't make games, but I do play them. And I'm at Gera. Do you want to give me some followers?
Cool. So tonight we were asked to come and talk to you about the art of promoting video games, which is one of my favourite topics because it's literally one of the only public aspects of making a game that can either go amazingly right or publicly, disastrously, embarrassingly, face-palmingly wrong. So I thought we'd kind of look at various topics, sort of have a bit of a chat about emails, about press, about Kickstarter, about content, what you can do to get your games out, and definitely what not to do. So on that theme, I thought I would kind of pass down the line and ask these three what the worst first bit of contact from a game developer you've ever gotten was, and why.
I'm going to mention one that, well, okay, I've got two things I want to mention. First of all, get the name of the website you're emailing correct. Because literally this week I had an email to my IndieHaven email address that was addressed, Dear GameSpot. I'm not GameSpot. I wish I worked for GameSpot, but I don't. And at that point I suddenly thought, okay, there's a very basic problem with your email. I'm slightly less sure about your email now. The other one, and this is a running theme that I get with so many emails, I'm sure this will be a topic coming up later in the thing, I think, having looked over at Christos's phone, is Kickstarter. Don't start your your first contact to a journalist with, hi, my game's on Kickstarter, I want this much money, it's going to be on Kickstarter for this long, without telling me what the game is. Because every email I get is Kickstarter, 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 before actually telling me what the game is. And it's a running theme that I see that and I just want to click off of your email because it's the same as every other email in my inbox.
Hello. So in addition to getting the name of the website right, I'd say get my name right. I've actually had an email to Philippa Warr, and I'm like, right, okay, I guess. And so the whole thing was just an exercise in repeatedly calling me Philip. So that was interesting. And then there are a few where people have sort of tried to make it very personal, but have kind of gone far over that line into, essentially, I have stalked you on several social media platforms and know what you've been doing, and I'm going to try and tailor my game's pitch around sort of a lot of your personal life. And so, you know, even if that stuff is out there, the sort of the sensation that it has been collected and is therefore being used to sort of monitor what you might be interested in is slightly unsettling and puts you a bit on the back foot and less receptive to your game that is coming your way.
So, I guess adding on that, the other day I got a hello Kevin, which is even my name, is even at least Philip is kind of close. It's like, I'm Emily, it's like, it's not remotely right, buddy. But, I mean, I think strangely it's very easy to commit that crime. You know, like when I was freelancing and I was first trying to get just any gig in the games industry, you know, everybody just churns out these cover letters. Everybody does that, and you copy and paste, and it's so easy to do that. And on the one hand, I think that I kind of look at that and I'm like, yeah, you know, I see that and I see something really human in that. You know, there's something really, you know, there's a bit of me in that, Kevin. You know, but the worst thing that you can do beyond that is to not stand out at all. And I think that that is really the major sin of most games developers when they're trying to get across to a journalist that you don't seem unique in any way. And this has particularly happened in the wake of sort of the golden era of Kickstarter, which is now very much over. I think a lot of people, they make this little Kickstarter profile and they say, you know, hey, you know, guys, you know, help me out, I'm a little indie developer. And it's lovely, but nobody will care. Nobody cares. And you need to find a reason to make people care. And I think that in a lot of ways, all of this kind of comes back to, you need to pretend that you're trying out for a job. You know, this is essentially kind of a job interview. You're sort of saying, you're selling yourself. You're saying, this is why you should give a shit. And if you don't give me a reason to, then, you know, calling me Kevin isn't the worst thing that you can do. It's not being interesting. If you're not interesting, that's the worst thing that you can do.
Very quick mention on the same point that Pip was making about the overly personal emails. I did have one in the last month or so where someone mentioned, for some reason they thought it was important to mention my favourite kind of sandwich, which is a really obscure sandwich that I mentioned once on a podcast over a year ago. That's where I was a bit sort of, that's slightly creepy. I don't know quite why you mentioned that, okay.
A bit worrying, if I'm honest. But yeah, I've actually found from coming from the other angle, it's actually really easy to still do the research about the writers you want to contact, but in a really constructive way. So, for example, we were having like a big indie launch event a little while ago, and we were sending out loads of press emails to the outlets we wanted to contact. It takes like 2 minutes to go on Rock Paper Shotgun and have a look at all their writers and then actually browse through your articles and figure out what sort of stuff they like to write about. And then when you're starting to write that email, you know, you can say, I mean, I think our example was because it was a games event and it was based in London and it was a very sort of independent game event and focused. We went with Alice O'Connor because we thought she was the ideal person to contact. So you just say, hey, I'm DS and Alice. Kind of talk to them about what they're interested in. Seems to me like the easiest way to capture their attention really is just show you've done your homework, but obviously just kind of drop out the sandwich references and the Kevins and the Philippa. Yeah, the other thing I kind of wanted to cover, which like you said is kind of related, is the whole Kickstarter pitch thing, which I mean sometimes video game Kickstarter pitches and funding pitches in general are a little on the ambitious side. I don't know how many of you are, can I see a show of hands how many of you are actually developers in the audience? So like a fair few, like there's a site called GameDev.net that has a forum where a lot of people tend to discuss their ideas and look for staff, and I cannot even begin to tell you how many times I have seen someone with a writing style suspiciously similar to that of a 15-year-old boy say, we are 4 people, we have no budget, and we are planning to make the best MMORPG the world has ever seen. It will eclipse World of Warcraft and blah 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 blah. It's horrendous, but there are some really good Kickstarters out there, some really good media. So I'd be interested to see kind of, you know, if you were to click through and actually have a look, you know, what sort of stuff draws you in terms of writing an article, encouraging people to fund something. And also, do you think there's any kind of, do you worry about encouraging gamers to invest in something that might not come to fruition? Like, how do you write around that?
In terms of your last point you were saying there, just about encouraging people to back Kickstarters, that's a particularly, it's an awkward thing with first-time indie developers, and that's where you see a lot of people that I get emailed about that have Kickstarters is because, okay, we have no budget because we've not created anything before. We want to get our first game's budget out of nowhere. We have no experience, we have nothing to back this up, but we want you to encourage your readership to give us money to make this. And it's before I personally cover a game from an unknown developer on Kickstarter. Like, the important things to me are understand that Kickstarter is not your news hook. It's not the thing that's going to get us interested, because as we've kind of said already, every game is on Kickstarter at this point. It doesn't make you stand out, it makes you blend in with the rest of those emails. Like, understand what it is about your game that makes it interesting, get us interested in the game and make us want to see this game succeed, and then say, look, okay, we're doing Kickstarter, here's what we got to try and convince you that it's, you know, a reliable thing. And yeah, you've got to, that's your key things, is work out what it is about your game that we should care about, then mention that it's Kickstarter, then make sure you insist to us, hey, here's why you can be confident in telling the readers about this, and confident we're not just going to run off with the money.
Yeah, so to sort of expand on some of those points, I guess, yeah, leading with Kickstarter is just a terrible idea, because that isn't the defining feature of your project. It's not the unique thing, it's not the selling point, it's just a platform that you're using. But if you have put together a Kickstarter pitch, if you've put together a video, if you've put together all of those things, you should know the selling points of your game. You should actually have to hand the reasons in a 2-minute pitch or less why somebody should invest in your game, should believe in your company, should trust that you can actually fulfill on the promises that you're making. And so those you can then repurpose, phrase them slightly differently, but they should form the bedrock of your email, because it's the bedrock of what you're actually even doing at any given time. And so in terms of sort of the trustworthiness of Kickstarter, I mean, obviously, I have never sort of told people that they should back something, simply because I think people need to decide for themselves what they think of that particular company. I mean, I know that some developers were actually trying to set up a scheme where they would sort of use their expertise to sort of pay it forward a bit and sort of endorse things that they thought were interesting and sort of repledge money because they had that expertise and could actually sort of weed out, I guess, projects that they thought were likely to succeed or were capable of being made good on. But then, that there are always sort of situations that you can't necessarily anticipate. So they could be the most competent people in the world, and yet a situation can come up where, perhaps they need more money, perhaps there's a bottleneck that wasn't anticipated, perhaps there's a legal problem, perhaps a sort of a third party was, a problem. So nothing's sort of ever definite in those situations, and so I would just sort of add the concept of don't, invest anything that you can't afford to lose, because it's not a pre-order system. It's, sort of an investment that may or may not pay off. So, that's something that informs when I'm writing an article. I wouldn't endorse, or, I wouldn't say people should do something with their money, because it's ultimately something that they have to decide whether they trust that themselves.
So nobody cares that you have a Kickstarter, basically. And when in the first year that I was working with Polygon, I think that was about a year into when Kickstarter was first getting really hot, and we would write regular articles just on the basis of X developer is now crowdfunding, and that was interesting, and now it's just sort of white noise. That being said, it's a very important platform, specifically for indie developers, and I think that's fantastic, but it's not, as everybody else has said, it's not a way of selling your game to the media, because nobody cares, basically. But I think the most important thing that, when I went to university, I didn't learn a whole lot, but coming out as an English major, the one thing that I learned that was really useful was the importance of a thesis statement. And I think that that's something that really needs to be learned by a lot of games developers. And I was told at that point that when you're sort of coming up with a way of creating this statement of what is this thing that you're trying to push, basically, you need to kind of imagine in your head, you know, you're in a dinner party, right? And someone comes up to you who has no real connection to you, probably only half listening. How do you explain to them what you're doing? And I think that's the most important thing that you need to learn. You need to learn how to say in as few words as possible why I should give a damn. Because most people aren't going to. Journalists, they're busy. You know, we get a lot of emails, and it's very easy to have these emails just slip through the cracks. And without knowing exactly how to sell yourself in the most sort of minimalist way possible, you know, I want to see in the first sentence, or else it's just going to completely pass me by. I'm not going to read multi-paragraphs. I'm not going to read your full Kickstarter probably, unless I'm really interested in it. You know, you need a punch, and it's, you know, it's annoyingly cynical to sort of say that, but you know, you're part of the white noise. You know, that's the state of the games industry right now. Everybody has the ability to create something fantastic. Most people create something awful, and that's creativity. You know, that's sort of just getting out there and experimenting with things. It's a lot of people making bad stuff but having really big ambition, and you need to find a way of, if you have something really great and you really believe in it, you need to be able to sell it to me in a single sentence, or else it just, you know, it goes into the void along with all these other things.
The one thing I want to add very quickly before we finish this is that, like, my two best examples of Kickstarters that I paid attention to really quickly were ones where you could sum up the entirety of the game and why it was interesting in a single tweet. And I think that that's a really good litmus test for it, is can you concisely say what's interesting about your game in a tweet? And my examples would be Mighty Tactical Shooter, which is, it's like Gradius, but turn-based. And what's the other one? Fist of Awesome, which was side-scrolling, time-traveling, lumberjack beat-em-up. And like, if you can have some punchy catchline, like something like that says, this is what my game is, be interested, please read more, in a tweet's worth of space, that's what's going to get us to keep reading more.
Yeah, it's very true. I would say definitely one of the things that's worth taking on board with all of this is, a big part of this is how accessible you make all of the assets and the information around your stuff. Because I found that, you know, you can send really good press releases. I mean, I will say don't just send traditional press releases. Don't like take a press release written in a traditional format where it starts in all caps and gives you the location and all that sort of stuff, and paste it into the body of the email. I get loads of those every day. I can't even begin to describe to you how much I can't read them. But the good thing about press releases, and the reason that they exist, is because the reason they're structured that way is to provide a lot of information, a lot of factual, well, most of the time, factual information to the person that's going to be covering your stuff. And the same goes for images. Like, don't watermark your images. Host your videos, don't self-host your videos, like, for Christ's sake, because if you've created, you know, like the next viral indie video game, you post it on your own website and not retweet it, it's gone. Like, but if it's on YouTube, obviously they've had the stress testing, they have the capacity to deal with that level of traffic. Yeah, again, same goes for images.Use Imgur. They have really beefy servers. It also looks really nice, because I don't know about you, but WordPress, like, image galleries are one of the major banes of my life, so it's important to frame it really well. I did kind of want to talk a little bit about video and why it's become so massively important. I mean, like, the obvious takeaway is because you can just watch people playing the thing that you want to know how it looks on that screen. Which was the worst sentence I've ever said. But what's really interesting about it, I think, is the way in which it can be presented. Like, there are some incredible uses. Like, like how many people are fans of games by Vlambeer, like Ridiculous Fishing, Lufthansa, stuff like that? Do you ever remember the first trailer that went out for Ridiculous Fishing? It wasn't a big YouTube trailer, it wasn't like a really overproduced like indie game movie style thing on Vimeo. It was a Vine. It was 6-7 seconds where literally the entire thing was hook goes down, fish comes up, gun comes out, Petter gets upset. And the amazing thing about it was like 2 weeks later EA did something very suspiciously similar, but I thought the reason it worked so well was, yeah, just because it was very accessible, it could be shared really easily, embedded really easily, things like that. And I was kind of wondering, you know, when you're looking at games, even just as people that enjoy games rather than just games journalists, you know, what sort of stuff catches your attention media-wise? Is it concept art, is it videos, is there anything in particular?
I think for me what's important is the same as we were just saying with emails, which is whatever it is you do, make sure that it understands the core of what your unique selling point of this game is and conveys that as quickly as possible. You don't want any kind of faffing around before you get into it. If you're someone who the person watching this video has never heard of before, you just need to, in that first few seconds, be like, right, what is the core of my game? Let's get that in front of your eyes as soon as possible and get you hooked on that. And that's all I can say really, is just understand what your core of your experience is and get to that as soon as you can.
In terms of video, I find that it's obviously it's so much more useful for actually seeing how the game plays, or you know, seeing how it actually works. Whereas if you write it down, so much can get lost in translation. So, and it's just that sort of very immediate way of picking up what the game's about. You saying about the Vine strategy and things, essentially it's good to have an understanding of what your options are in terms of presentation, because some games will actually lend themselves incredibly well to a super short sort of 6-second clip, but others might benefit from something far longer. Or if your game is set in a phenomenally beautiful sort of, I guess, walking simulator type environment, you might want to have those sort of panoramic kind of screenshots, that sort of rich detail that will actually express what your game's about. So again, it is sort of understanding what you've created and why people will want to engage with it, why they might pick it up, and working out how best to express that, whether that's video or whether it's images or anything like that. But I would say that websites are, or like to sort of focus on their video proposition, and so having a trailer that you can embed, having something where you can then point people towards at the end and sort of keep them on the site that little bit longer, or you know, it's a very popular way of, I hate this, I'm saying, consuming content, but it does help to actually have that extra sort of type of media that you can add in. You know, you want people to be able to see a picture of what it looks like. You want them to actually sort of see the moving thing itself. You want them to sort of have as many access points as possible. And when it's stuff like YouTube that is actually sort of, you know, easily playable on a smartphone or something, that does, you know, helps.
So the one issue with things like Vines and trying to sort of get this sweet hit off of some short video or something, is that there's a lot of games that, well, like you said, just don't really work that way, you know. And so if you're making like a MOBA, for example, it's not going to look that interesting in a 30-second clip whatsoever. But I think that there are other avenues to sort of other avenues that you can use as a solution for that. So I'm a very big believer in Twitch. Get on Twitch. You want to watch people playing this, and if it's you playing it, that is fine. Just get people watching this game, and it's okay if it's not some very easily digestible, you know, quick video. It doesn't need to be. It's nice if it is, you know, because I think very much right now we're in this kind of this Twitter mentality in journalism where you do want these very quick hot hits like that, but there are people out there who are interested in actually looking at the bigger picture of what this game is. And like we were talking about before, when you research the different people who are working on different websites and see what they're interested in. So for me, with Polygon, I'm like the esports person. I'm the only person who likes that stuff. So you go to me because I would watch that Twitch stuff. If you like these very long, hardcore RPGs, you go to somebody else or to me, whichever. But there are certain people who will eat up that content, but it's not necessarily the easiest way to go, but sometimes it's the necessary way to go.
I'd just add to that sometimes people do other interesting things with videos. So I don't know if you've heard of Sound Self. It's a game by Robin Arnott, and he basically you sort of make noises into a microphone and it alters the landscape that you're sort of moving through, like the Doctor Who time tunnel wormhole thing. But something that he was doing the other day was streaming on Twitch, somebody playing while hooked up to an EEG, and so you could sort of see different bits of their brain being active. And so, sort of other ways of engaging with the game, or sort of other interesting things that people are doing or presenting, or, not in a gimmicky way, but just in a, hey, that's actually super interesting. And, then obviously with Twitch and places like that, you can archive it and sort of, so people can then embed it and bits like that. It's not just a live broadcast, but yeah, just sort of having that understanding of who might be interested as well, who you're talking to and what bits you'd like to seed out to people.
The 2 points I'd probably make to round that off would be the one most important point is give permission. Have put a post on your website that make it as obvious as possible. Are you a YouTuber, a Twitch streamer? Click here, and just have a written statement on your website that says it's absolutely fine to stream my stuff, to make videos about it, blah blah blah. Some of them will monetize it, some of them will make money off it, but that can be up to literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people making gameplay videos of your stuff for free. This is stuff that costs thousands and thousands of pounds to be done professionally. People do it for no money because they enjoy it and because they're financially compensated, and you don't have to do that. I think I really recommend that. And the other thing is just kind of looking at games perhaps from a different angle, raise of hands of how many people have ever seen Andy Kelly's Other Places video series. We had a bunch of developers in my flat, and there were 5 of us sat in front of Other Places for I think we just had it on the background. That playlist is 4 hours long. It looped at least 1.5 times because it's that good. And essentially what it is, for those who don't know, is he takes music from the score and then he breaks the game by allowing the camera to move freely and does beautiful panning shots of all of the different game environments you can find. He's done it for Batman. I believe the one he did for Bioshock ended up getting shown at a German film festival. But what was really interesting about it was that so much effort goes into these tiny little bits of these games, stuff you wouldn't even possibly notice. The indie game Proteus, for example. Most people's videos, would be navigating and stuff. For me, it's just hardcore chasing frogs, MLG style from start to finish. But it's just nice to show different aspects of the stuff that you have. Given that we've been going for about 25 minutes, I was kind of interested in whether anyone had any questions about game promotion or anything like that.
Yeah, so what's your take, each of you, on making the content yourself, so actually doing this Twitch streaming yourself and making the YouTube videos versus going out and spending the same time trying to get others to sort of get in contact with sort of people who do Twitch or YouTube and saying, do you want to come on my game?
I guess to start with a quick point from me, I'm a producer, but I specialise in content and content marketing. I really like the word. The rest of games journalism, I can assure you, does not. But yeah, it's It's definitely worth it, but it's kind of, I would think of it more as you're kind of planting the seed content-wise than actually doing all of it yourself. So by all means, like, stream stuff and record stuff, but if you've got a powerful enough bit of hardware, just record everything you can, because you'd be amazed at what people will find interesting. Like, every time I do some development, a lot of the time I'm time-lapsing, just because it takes almost no effort, almost no CPU, and then you end up with like this incredible video watching a game come to life, and if you time-lapse that over some weeks, you will have the world's largest screenshots folder, but it would be really worth it, I think.
In terms of your bit of your question about doing the content yourself versus getting other people to do it, the only thing to bear in mind when you're doing your own, say, Twitch streams or things of your game is that if you don't pair that along with a plan of how you're going to promote that content, what you end up with is you're preaching to your own existing audience, and that's not a problem. That's a good thing. It's definitely helping to keep your audience engaged, but bear in mind that the benefit of getting other people to do streams and videos of your games is that they will be much more likely to then market that themselves and to sort of actively push that out, and then you start pushing content, your content to their audiences rather than pushing your content to your own audience and hoping that they'll pass it on. So.
I think it can be interesting to have both as well, because obviously you know your game inside out, and so when you're sort of playing you can point to interesting things, or you can sort of, you know, discuss other bits of the game and sort of, you know, just sort of give that level of extra insight. But the other thing is, when people who aren't that familiar with your game start playing it, you can see sort of what a genuine unconnected player would actually do in that scenario. You can start to see perhaps the bits that aren't clear to them. You can start to see the bits that they are super enjoying, ways in which they might sort of be breaking the game on purpose that are actually really fun. You know, they're very different experiences, and they bring very different information to people, and also to you. You would probably find it very useful to watch other people playing your game and see where they excel and where they don't, because that might, you know, just highlight things that you haven't noticed or that you weren't aware were either problems or, you know, extra awesome features. So I think, yeah, they're both very useful to you and to other people, but in very different ways.
So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy not doing both. You gotta do both. But, I mean, from a very cynical perspective in terms of how do I get the media to care at all, I think that you need to get people other than yourself playing it, and in a lot of ways Reddit is kind of, I mean, it's the it of the internet, right? And so if Reddit doesn't care, nobody cares. And I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's a horrible way of thinking about this thing that you've made, but I think in a lot of ways journalists are busy, you know, and we get bombarded with stuff, and if we don't sort of see this audience that's kind of already there in the background, then we probably won't necessarily want to write about it unless it's really incredible. So if you can get, I mean, you can see the kind of horrible force that people like PewDiePie have over like YouTube, and you know, if you can get anybody who has some kind of existing audience to have any kind of interest in what you're making already, then that's obviously nothing but a good thing, right?
I just wanted to very quickly add that, like, from the journalist perspective, I guess, it's that any developer should be making content of their own game, regardless of whether their game turns out to be any good or not, or whether it's of any interest to us or not. That doesn't tell us anything. But when we see that people other than the developer are interested in the game enough to take time to make content about it, that says at least that, oh, there is something that some people are interested in this, there is something worth looking at here. Like, that is, I guess, the difference between seeing that the community are engaged with your product rather than you're engaged with your own product, is just that it says something about the fact that maybe that's a sign that we should be interested.
We have time for one more.
What's the difference between memorable and gimmicky? And is there a formula? And what's your formula for that?
I'm as sentimental of a bastard, and a lot of my job involves making content that can sometimes be quite emotional anyway. I would say that's an extremely subjective thing. Like some people would say that, you know, emotional content would be like Indie Game the Movie is a really good example. I mean, if you were to do that, it would be about, you know, your own studio, for example, and the trials and tribulations they go through. You know, that would be really interesting content. Some other people, it would be, you know, seeing, you know, a hilarious series of bugs and all the way your game has gone wrong and stuff, and the end result of that appears to be Goat Simulator, so that's not an entirely bad route to go down. But yeah, I do think it's extremely subjective. I think what you want to do really is show why it's important to you and why you're emotionally attached to it. Because the amazing thing, and this goes double for indie games, is that indie games generally aren't made by 1,000 people. They're made by like 1, maybe 4. And those people have very strong personalities, tend to come across in a lot of the videos they make about their own games. I really like it. Like one of my favourite gaming videos on YouTube is this guy who talks for 8 minutes about how the camera works in Super Mario Bros. 3. It sounds like the most boring thing in the world, but I swear to God, like the amount of passion and interest he has in talking about a topic, like it's not his game, but like to talk with that much interest in what you're talking about, people will naturally be interested in it too. It's the reason TED Talks are so popular. I've got no interest whatsoever in physics most of the time, bar, you know, avoiding falling over all the time, but the interest is there because they're interested in it, and it impresses you so you're interested in it.
On your question of whether there's a formula, I wish there was a formula, because if there was a formula, I'd give it to every developer, because I would love if every email I got was interesting and memorable. I really, really would. You sort of asked a bit about what's the difference between a gimmick and something that's an interesting hook, I guess. And to me, it's easy to say in hindsight, but I think that the difference comes from there's this intangible thing when you're reading an email, that it's the difference between someone who feels like they have told you about this interesting thing because they're passionate about it themselves, versus we have put this in because we think you'll be interested. I know it's a very intangible thing to say, but this kind of goes into the point that you were just saying, Christos, which is this sort of, it all comes down, I think, the difference between something that feels like it's in there as a gimmick to try and grab our attention versus something that's a genuinely interesting hook we want to follow up on is, for me at least, does it feel like the person who's emailed me about that, does it feel like they're passionate about this? Because if they're passionate about it, I'm more willing to believe that this isn't something that's shoehorned in as a gimmick, this is something that genuinely is something important about this product, and like that passion has to come across in that very early in that email, because that's, for me, what will tell me, okay, is this something that I'm going to get some interesting content out of like talking to you and digging into this, or is this something that it's a bullet point and there's not really much more to dig into, I guess?
Yeah, I would say that you asked about the difference between being memorable and being gimmicky. And they're not actually mutually exclusive, but I would say that what the worst about gimmicky is that it feels misleading and dishonest, and that it doesn't represent the game properly. It's a hook that is designed to get your attention, to get you reading, and then it's sort of almost a sleight of hand. You sort of then suddenly get the game, and that's kind of the worst of all situations, because the thing that led you to the game isn't really what the game's about anyway, and so the thing that caught your attention is kind of a lie in some ways, and so that's why that stuff is to be treated with a huge amount of caution, and that I guess goes back to the first points that we made, which were related to the Kickstarter stuff. You should know why your game's interesting, you should know why people should want to play it, you should be able to deliver that in the first 2 lines of the email, and if you can't, and if the only way of doing it is dishonesty or something that's a bit misleading or something that isn't actually even central to the game, then you should reassess what you're doing.
I like the question. I would argue there's not much difference. I think that the main difference is in whether you consider yourself an artist or a businessman. I think that games, no matter what people sort of argue, are part of a, they're part of a capitalist market, right? And no matter what you do, it's essentially going to be a gimmick. Even if you're pouring your heart out in this sort of diary-laden story about your dead kid or something, just something, oh, so heartbreaking. There's still going to be, because it's essentially a business venture, it's still essentially a gimmick on some level. This is still a way of advertising. Not to put it down from everything you're making, but yeah, I think that there's a very blurred line between the two.
Cool. I'd like to thank panel for picking up me rambling for ages and for giving their answers. Give them a round.